Barack Obama is in the news because he's an egomaniac and a narcissist. He's never changed. Did great damage to this country. Great damage to the unity of this country, to race relations in this country, in my view. Did great damage to our relations with our allies. Did great damage to law enforcement, our military, which we're still trying to build up as a result of what he did, given what China's up to. I can't think of any areas. People have often said to me, well, can you think of one thing? No, I can't think of one thing he did that I agree with. Not one. So now he gets to pontificate about how horrible America is while he and the missus are collecting $100 million. I get so sick of this, you have no idea. So sick of it. Bernie Sanders with his 3 homes, with his Marxist propaganda. The media, they're all overpaid with their Marxist crap. I'm just sick of it. And so Obama's at Rice University's Baker Center. This would be James A. Baker, who is close to the Bush family, who was brought into the Reagan administration, but was always a rhino. And by the way, Karl Rove on TV trashed Ted Cruz just about 20 minutes ago. Guy's got no class. No class whatsoever. Mr. Architect, who lost the House and the Senate in 2006. Mr. Architect, whose candidate in 2000, came down to 300 votes, as I recall. Anyway, here's Obama. 8, go.
When I hear people say they don't like identity politics, they don't like... I think it's important to remember that identity politics doesn't just apply when it's black people or gay people or women.
No.
You know, the folks who really originated identity politics were the folks who said, 3/5 clause and all that stuff. That was identity politics.
Hold on. This guy's supposed to be a constitutional professor, or was, and he really wasn't. For the 400th time, the 3/5 clause in the Constitution was pushed by the northern states, the non-slave states. And the reason they did this was not because they believed that blacks were 3/5 of a person. 3/5 went to the representation in the House of Representatives. And they were struggling with this issue of slavery. The North rejected it. Certain states, particularly Georgia and South Carolina, were protecting it. And they said, okay, look, we want to resolve the House of Representatives issue here, so we're going to count your slaves as 3/5 of a vote for purposes of apportionment in the House of Representatives because you don't treat them as free people. In other words, the North wanted to reduce the power and the representation of the South in the House of Representatives. This idiot doesn't even know the history. And this is told day in and day out in public schools and colleges and universities in the country. Nobody studies this. It was the North trying to reduce the representation of the South in the House of Representatives. It was an initiative of the North. The free states. But what does that have to do with anything? 200 and some years ago. What does that have to do with anything? Have there been no changes since? This identity politics balkanizes the nation. Everybody's a victim. And then everybody has to out-victim everybody else. And then you're at loggerheads. And then you're at sword points. That's the problem with this. And he's the guy who brought all this back during his presidency. And by the way, Obama, the great politician who got elected president, really, I think any Democrat could have beaten McCain or Romney. I really do. They were horrible candidates. Terrible candidates. Go ahead.
That's still out there. Maybe that was a little too controversial for Houston, but
what the hell does that mean? And why is James Baker laughing? Go ahead.
Jim Crow was identity politics. That's where it started.
Jim Crow was identity politics. How about today, Mr. Former President? What about identity politics? If identity politics was wrong at the Constitutional Convention, if identity politics was wrong during Jim Crow, why do you embrace it? Why don't you embrace Martin Luther King instead and a colorblind society? That's the point. To treat people as individuals. And unfortunately, James A. Baker is just not up to the task. More when I return.